Hi, my name is Summer, and I am a real alcoholic and addict. Welcome to Big Book Compendium's Friday night Big Book study. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have an exciting night ahead of us. I have my friend Chris S. here with me, and we're going to break down the Big Book. And Chris, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic on or around December 28th, 1989. God separated me from alcohol. I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous and seemed to have done my job and stayed around. I'm from a little town called Blairstown, New Jersey, up in the northwest part of New Jersey, and I'm real happy to be here today.
Yay! And we thank you so much for coming and joining us on Friday nights. I know Friday nights are hard, so thank you so much for coming. All right, so we are just finishing up Bill's story. We're on the bottom of page 14, and I'm going to start to read, and then we'll stop as warranted. All right, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. Chris, do you have anything to say on this?
You know, asking me if I've got anything to say is dangerous. Yes, I do have a lot to say on this. So, Bill Wilson got involved early on with a group of people who were really involved in, the best way I could describe it is experiential religion, experiential Christianity. And what I mean by that is, there's devotional. There's you can go to church on Sunday for an hour, and come on Palm Sunday and stuff like that. That's devotional. Experiential are the people who go all in. They meet every night. They go on retreats. They read all the books. They practice all the religious principles. And he got involved with this group of people in New York called the Oxford Group. And that's where he learned that he had to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self sacrifice for others. So he got put right on the right track. Today, I believe the solution to alcoholism is living a progressively spiritual life. So right away he was thrown into this milieu of people. Now, very, very quickly on, he realized that he's not, him and the non-alcoholics, don't really play in the sandbox very well together, right? So around, after 2 or 3 years or whatever with the Asha group, he kind of formed his own group of drunks, but they were continuing to practice the spiritual principles that they learned in this experiential religious society called the Oxford Group. So I'll talk more about that after Summer reads some more.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Well, wonderful. All right. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is designed for living that works in rough going. And I can't see anything more true than, when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. It talks about it in other parts of the book that nothing will ensure immunity from drinking like working with others and working with another alcoholic. And I just find that so true. Chris, do you have anything to say?
So, so Bill was taught, the spiritual principles, the spiritual exercises in the Oxford group. But he very, very soon understood that it was going to be very important for him to stick with alcoholics, stay with alcoholics, work with alcoholics, be around alcoholics, because coupled with the spiritual exercises was going to need to be a fellowship, hanging out with people with a common problem. And the first time he learned this lesson is he walked back into his house. He's sober maybe 4 or 5 months, and he's pissed off because everybody he tries to work with, they're all getting drunk on him. You ever have sponsees that get drunk on you and make you look bad? So these people are making him look bad, and he's really mad. And when he goes into the house and he's complaining to Lois, he's like, not one of these people is grasping what I'm trying to tell them about recovery. I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my time. And Lois looks at him and says, "You're sober." So it starts to dawn on him that his activity in carrying the message, trying to help the alcoholic, was conducive to his own sobriety. So you couple the fellowship, the hanging out with drunks, and you couple that with the spiritual principles, and he's starting to really get onto something that was going to be Alcoholics Anonymous.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All right. Moving on page 15, we commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. Chris?
So picture this guy, Bill Wilson, right? He's, a down and out stockbroker. Money was really hard to come by. He's getting thrown out of his apartment. They're foreclosing on his brownstone. All this kind of stuff is going on. Yet he's focused on this, continuing to practice the spiritual principles and continuing to work with other alcoholics. He's focused on that. And it starts to gain traction. Really, when this book was published, it really started to gain traction. And then when the Jack Alexander article and the Liberty Magazine article and the Cleveland Plain Steel article, all of a sudden there's some publicity about this. And Bill Wilson got to watch this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous go from 10 people to 100 people, to 1,000 people, to 10,000 people, to 100,000 people, to 1,000,000 people, to 100,000 groups, in 70 different countries. What an experience that must have been for him. And the thing that I respect the most about him is he worked incredibly hard on keeping his humility, not becoming, the kingpin, the guy in charge. You know what I mean? He really tried to temper that big shotism that was within him. And he led this thing to an incredible success.
Yes. Thank you. Awesome, Chris. All right. On page 16, on an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. I love that. Chris?
Bill's story is absolutely perfect. That's why it's in the front of the book. It's a beautiful example of what a 12-step call would look like if you go and you visit somebody, the story that you tell and the information that you give the prospective, person that might be willing to come into Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's a work of art. I've been through it, 600 times and I still find value in it. Now, I want to talk about something a little bit in left field, but I think it's important. So I got done reading a book. I was out in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago, and I finished this book up. And I'll ask Summer to put it up after I talk about it, in case anybody is interested. But what it was, here's the story. This guy's a book dealer, like a high-end book dealer. He comes in and he buys collections from estates, the really beautiful collectible books. And he goes around New England, doing this, and he sells them. That's what he does for a living. This guy, Stephen Pethero. And there's this family on Cape Cod that is asking him to come. Would you come? Would you come? Right? And he's like, yeah, it's a little far. Finally, they talk him into coming. And he walks into this house and he looks at these books and he's like, oh my God, it is the most amount of beautiful first edition author signed spiritual books he's ever seen in his life. And he's like, who the hell lived here? And they start, they said, well, our grandfather, blah, 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 the person owned the house. Turns out the guy's name was Axman. And what he was he was a publisher. He was the main editor, the main religion editor in Harper's Publishing from the 20s until 1965. And he published everybody. And this guy's going through all of his records and he's finding all this stuff about and by Bill Wilson, right? Like Bill Wilson was tight with this guy. Come to find out, Axman is the guy that edited the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And he edited and published it, and he edited and published AA Comes of Age. He made a special deal with Works Publishing because he was friends with Bill. So he could, AA could publish it in perpetuity, and do whatever they want with it. But he's the one that put the original product together for those two books. He was heavily involved in it. So he was really, really tight with Bill. And here's the thing: this guy edited books. Excuse me. This guy found and edited authors that changed the way we look at religion and spirituality. He was not the kind of religious guy who was much interested in showing up at church on Sunday, and see you next Sunday. He was involved in experiential spirituality. He didn't care what religion you were from, as long as you were excited about it and you were digging deep. And he published Albert Schweitzer. He published Martin Luther King Jr. He published Dorothy Day. He published Huxley. He published Hurd. I mean, the giants of modern religious or spiritual thought in the 20th century. And here's the thing that this book dealer finds out about Bill Wilson, because this guy Axman never threw a thing away. He found out that there was a special club that they were in. There was a number of them, and they got together regularly. And it was all about, what are you reading? What kind of practices are you doing? What retreat are you going to? Like these guys, not only were they the top people in the country as far as spiritual and religious modern thought, they were hanging with Bill. Now this is remarkable to me, because here's this guy in Alcoholics Anonymous who he's writing these wonderful articles. If you want to see, a good glimpse of Bill's writing, get Language of the Heart and just go through it really, really critically. Those are all his essays that he wrote for the Grapevine, right? You can see how important continued spiritual growth is to Bill Wilson. He was a doer and he was a practitioner, right? He was in there with everybody from Abby Hoffman, I'm telling you, he was in there with those guys. And he was trying to experience this stuff. Now, here's the thing. What I believe today is, once I've separated from the alcohol, my alcoholism is an aspect of my self-consciousness. And there's a whole bunch of defects of character that lie within this extreme example of self-consciousness. And the antidote, or the process for getting right size within this expanded sense of self, is spiritual practices and spiritual growth, continued, deeper every year type of spiritual growth. And Bill Wilson did this for the rest of his life. And the more I learn about him, the more I'm impressed by him, because he didn't put up billboards, and he didn't take awards, and he didn't want to be the number one guy. But when you look at what he was doing, and what he was reading, and how he was living, he's a beautiful example of how we can survive this progressively fatal malady called alcoholism, and make our life full of quality and purpose while we're doing it. He paved the way. So that's what I wanted to say before we moved on to the next chapter, Summer.
That was beautiful. Thank you. And I'll definitely be
Put that book up for anybody that cares. I'll give you a little teaser. The whole Bill Wilson LSD experience is in that book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Yes.
We're going to move on to There Is a Solution on page 17. I know I'm always interested in that one. When I hear about that, I'm like, I want to know more about his experience. Okay, page 17, There Is a Solution, chapter 2. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. I think that's enough to ask you, do you have anything to say about that, Chris?
They've solved the drink problem. So there's a solution. A lot of times we want to show up and we want answers. Why? How much, can you just tell me, my life is terrible. What's going, when's it going to get better? We want like answers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, infinitely better than getting an answer, for like why you're an alcoholic. Listen, knowing why you're alcoholic is the booby prize. What we want is we want a solution. We want to concentrate on a solution. So if he's saying right out of the gate that they have found a way to solve the drink problem, we must pay attention. If we too want to solve this this occasionally becoming overserved issue that we're going through.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And as we just read Bill's story and, seeing just as hopeless as Bill, that's just how I was as well. And it's the best time when I heard about being hopeless, being a good time to come into Alcoholics Anonymous or to decide, you know, to be separated from alcohol. When I heard that being hopeless was good, I didn't really understand that. But here it says we were just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered and solved the drink problem. I mean, really, our higher power solves the drink problem, right? Like, not they. But when they're talking about we, it's the first 100 or 77 or however many it was, I believe. Am I right, Chris?
Yeah, so it was a crazy group of people. There seemed to be more success going on in Akron than really New York, because they were a little bit more stringent about the spiritual practices than New York. New York was a little bit more of a psychological, and Bill was spending a lot of his attention on things like the book and other things. He was trying to build the architecture of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, Dr. Bob is doing home groups and taking people through the steps, and Bill Wilson is trying to create the architecture of this thing so that it can be, it can grow and be expanded. Um, but but people who normally would not mix. I got to tell you, when I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous, there was lawyers and policemen and clergy and all these people I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But almost immediately, I felt comfortable with all of them because we had a common problem. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you, even the people that I detested early on, if they called me up and they said, I'm really thinking of drinking, would you come over and talk to me? Even if I detested them, I would drive over and talk to them to help them stay away from a drink. It was just it was a different experience for me. I was coming back into society, into the fellowship, back out into the world, and it was the perfect place for me to do that. I was comfortable in that environment. So the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, even in the early days, you start to really listen to some of the stories of the first 100. These were crazy some bitches. You know what I mean? These people were lunatics, and yet they were able to build this thing, and so it just gives me a lot of hope. It does. It gives me a lot of hope.
And to piggyback on what you just said, I find it interesting that in the original manuscript, it was all have recovered. It was they have solved the drink problem, but it said all have recovered. So it wasn't nearly all, but all, like, there was 100% success rate if you worked the program, if you did the program. Is that right?
Well, what they would say is the people who came in and meant business.
Mm-hmm.
So what he meant by meant business was consistency. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Consistency. They're showing up every meeting. They've gone through the proposals. They're helping other alcoholics. And so, they're working with newcomers. The people that were doing that, consistently stayed sober, and they still do today. So were there a lot of people who just didn't buy in? They were in half measure lane and they got drunk and they left. Yeah, there was way more of those than there were people that stayed sober. But Bill is saying, the people who were compliant with this stuff, have recovered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just as true today as it was back then.
Yeah, great point. Okay. Moving on, we are still on page 17, second paragraph. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and understanding, which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Chris?
So, a common solution to common peril. That's, that really is the key to our membership, and the key to our commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a singleness of purpose guy. I've kind of come to that over the years, and the singleness of purpose is to recover from alcoholism. To live a life recovered from alcoholism. That's my singleness of purpose. And with something like that, it kind of means you need to be alcoholic. You know what I mean? To achieve something like that. So our common bond is we're gonna die drinking ourselves to death. Our common solution is we're going to do this stuff. We're going to participate in this stuff. See, now here's how I see it today. And if you ask me next year, I'll probably have a different perspective because I stay open minded, and I soak in a lot of different things. But here's the way I see the steps today. I see the first 9 steps like boot camp. Now think about this. Let's say you want to become a soldier. You go to boot camp and you become disciplined at a number of things: shooting, marching, exerting yourself to the point of passing out, getting in shape. All this stuff happens in boot camp as like an extreme experience. Now, if you go through the steps the way I would like you to go through steps, you'll go through the steps in about the same period it would take you to go through boot camp. Okay. And that's kind of the same type of a thing. It disciplines you to inventory. It disciplines you toward asking for help. It disciplines you to amends. There's a number of things that you get experience with that you're going to need for the rest of your life. And then when you move into step 10, 11, and 12, it's continuous application of all these things that you learned in boot camp. You know what I mean? And if you've paid attention and you've done your job, you're going to have the tools that you need to live a successful alcohol-free life. It enables you to get in touch with this power that seems to release you from drinking. You know what I mean? You're not fighting it anymore. You're not driving around the block not to drive past the liquor store. You're not missing your daughter's wedding because they're going to have a toast. None of that crap is true because you've been released from the obsession to put alcohol in your body. And this is what we've discovered. This is what many of us do. We're Alcoholics Anonymous members in good standing. And for anybody out there that really thinks they're ruggedly individualistic, there's a lot of latitude in this thing. No one among us maintains anything like perfect adherence to any of this stuff, and there's a lot of latitude. And we can go left and we can go right as long as the main structure of our life is is sound. There's a lot of leeway in all this stuff. You can run big book workshops in Europe. You can go to silent retreats, in Burma. You know what I mean? You can become a priest. You can make more money as a salesman. There's a, there's a lot of latitude in this, but common solution, common peril. We've got to stay close to this stuff. And if there's the most important word, I think, in the recovery process is consistency. It's inconsistency that screws us up more than anything else. And you just look at what happened during COVID. You want to see the impact of inconsistency. I go back to meetings that I was going to before COVID, and 80, 90% of the people are different. Where did everybody go? Maybe some of them found that they didn't really need to go to meetings. Maybe some of them relapsed and died. Maybe some of them moved. I don't know, but I'm talking like 85% of the people in these meetings are different. So I'm sorry. I want to be consistent. I know what works. I know what works for me. And God help me if I start to spend my time everywhere but, the recovery, triangle. God help me, because I'm a terrible alcoholic. I'm the type of alcoholic. Within 5 minutes, you got to detox me. You got to take me to the hospital, and you got to put me on Librium, because I go into the DTs, and the DTs are fun. That's like terror, convulsions and hallucinations all at once, like, ah! and they really annoy, the ER staff, Friday night when you show up at the hospital, oh my God, the guy in room 3, you know, he thinks I'm Satan. I just don't want to go through any of that crap, anymore. You know what I mean? So it's easier. The easier, softer way is consistency with all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went off on a tangent there, a rant, Summer, but I know that's legal here.
It is. It is. Thank you. All right. I love your stories. Okay, so the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes annihilation of all the things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those lives, all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. ER doctors, nurses. Yeah. Okay. Chris, do you have anything to say about this?
Sure. What this paragraph leads me to discuss is this. So back in the 40s, a woman named Marty Mann started to hang around with people at the Yale School of Alcohol Studies, and she started to really influence some of these some of these scholars, some of these scientists, and that were studying alcoholism. And she brought Bill and Bob up there, and they started to do lectures. And Alcoholics Anonymous, at least some of the founding members, were really involved in the front lines of alcoholism studies. And out of that, she started this organization called National Council on Alcoholism. It later became National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. And I've been a board member for about 15 years, and me and 3 other guys about 2 years ago changed it to NCAR, National Center for Recovery and Advocacy, because that's really what we're doing with this organization now. But Marty Mann, the first woman to stay sober, started this thing. Now, the main purpose of this for 50 years, since the 40s, was to get rid of stigma that involves alcoholism. That was the main point. She wanted people to start to think of alcoholism like cancer, or start to think of alcoholism like heart disease. Because everyone's thinking about, oh, that scumbag alcoholic. Did you see him puking all over the bride at the wedding? I mean, it just we people just detest us. I'm an alcoholic. They think, oh my God, he's in the park with a paper bag. It's just there's tons of stigma. Now, what I know about what NCADD was able to do about stigma, that in about 60 years of trying to reduce stigma, they reduced stigma about this much. Okay, that's how successful they were. Now, here's stigma. We have stigma about alcoholics, and I'll give you some examples. All right, so part of the NCA, part of NCART is we get about $20 million from a federal grant, and what we do is we put welfare to work. It's called welfare to work, and if you show up and you're going to collect welfare, and it even looks like you have a substance abuse problem or alcoholism, there's an assessor in each county, and we pay for and provide treatment. Uh, whatever kind of treatment you need. If you need an IOP, fine. If you need 6 months inpatient, fine. We take care of it and we manage it and we pay for it. The NCADD with this grant money. Now we'll send somebody to Happy Hills treatment, and they'll call us up a week later and they'll say, we had to discharge, we had to we had to discharge Harry. Why'd you discharge Harry? Oh, he was drinking. Well, wait a minute. We're paying you to treat Harry for alcoholism. The main symptom of alcoholism is intoxication, and you're throwing him out for exhibiting a symptom of the illness we're asking you to treat him for. Are you insane? That's how we look at it, because we look at it stigma free. The treatment center is like, this idiot was drinking, he's going to affect the whole rest of the population. If he drank in your alcoholism treatment program, it's your fault, not his. He's powerless, you idiots, right? What are you doing wrong? But these people don't see it like that. Oh, you said, the rest of the population was so upset, Well, so that's how the people that treat us exhibit stigma. Because if somebody's cancer came back and it went from stage 2 to stage 3, you think they'd throw them out of the program? No. All right. So how do we stigmatize? Well, you'll get the type of sponsor who'll be the type of sponsors. Kids, shut up. You got nothing to say for the first 6 months. Take the cotton out of your ears and shove it in your mouth. You puke. We'll have sponsors like that, right? Come on. If you had a navigator in your cancer treatment, would they tell you to shut up, stupid? You know what I mean? So we have stigma. We have stigma about how we handle people in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's why the NCADD was able to reduce stigma by this much. We all still see it as a disgusting failing. You know what I mean? So not, there's different levels of this, right? Some of us are more informed and more compassionate these days about, how we deal with other alcoholics. But come on, Bill was saying this in this chapter. If someone had cancer, all are sorry for them, But if you have alcoholism, boy, you're a loser. And it's genetic, like most illnesses. Alcoholism is genetic, and there's a contributing behavioral thing. I'll give you that. But I got the bullet. I was an alcoholic waiting for my first drink in kindergarten. You know what I mean? So anyway, another rant. Summer, you pick it up and try to save this thing. Try to fix this whole thing.
Okay. Oh gosh. All right. Page 18. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. And I wonder why. After all that you just explained, Chris. I mean, why it's hard to talk about our situation, with openness, and it's discussing a situation without reserve is hard. Thinking like, well, what are they going to think of me? What is the stigma? What can I tell this person? What can I tell my therapist? Then I tell the psychiatrist something else. Then I tell the sponsor, little
So,
bits and
so
pieces.
I've had experiences working with people where, they're married and they've got families and kids and everything, and the wife has been trying. They tried every desperate thing they possibly. Am I still there? For some reason, my computer did something weird.
Yes,
So,
you are.
they come into Alcoholics Anonymous. They meet a bad electrician called Chris, and in 5 minutes, they're staying sober, and their lives are getting better. And they just can't believe it, right? And and it's because of the common problem, common solution. Anybody. So I'm going to tell a quick story here, and then I'm going to explain to you why other people couldn't get through to me. All right, I had this process every single day. I came home from work. I flew home from work, and I went to the liquor store, and I had a routine. I had a 20 in my pocket. I would walk in. I'd get a quart of vodka, if it was the summer, a quart of bourbon, if it was the winter. And I had a process. I had a 20. I'd grab the bottle. I'd go up to the cash register. I'd throw the 20 down. The guy would give me my change, drop the bottle in a paper bag, and I'm out. Right. And within 5 minutes, I'm drinking because the liquor store was at the top of my street. And it was what I did right after I got out of work. So this one day I go in and I got my 20 and I got my bottle and I go up to the cash register and the cashier is talking to this lady. He's like talking to this lady, and this lady's going, "Do you know what kind of wine goes with tilapia?" And he's answering her, right? He's like, well, there's this wonderful Chablis from the Northern Vineyards. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he starts taking her around and showing her all the bottles all over the store. And I'm like holding up this, I'm like, vodka buyer here, hurry up. What's the matter with you? Well, are you crazy? I got a problem. I got a problem. I'm sober. Now, and as soon as he dropped the bottle into the paper bag, I started to feel better. Now you tell me I got a drinking problem, and you want to talk to me about my drinking problem. Okay? How's that going to work? How's that going to work for the guy who's flipped out because there's a tilapia lady in front of him? I don't see alcohol as the problem. I'm in this land of delusion that alcohol is my solution. Alcohol is the only thing that's going to allow me to cope. You know what I mean? And so the doctors are talking to me, the psychiatrists, the police, the Reverend McGillicuddy, my mother, all these people are talking to me, and they don't understand what it's like to be behind a tilapia lady. So they're never going to get through to me. Howard comes up to me in meeting number one, and he can read right through all that stuff. You know what I mean? He can cut away all that stuff, and he can look me right in the eye and see what's going on and know what's going on because he's been there. You know what I mean? And when he starts to share with me, I know I know he's telling the truth. I know he's sincere, and I know he wants to help, and I know he's been there. He knows what it's like to stand behind the tilapia lady. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. All right, we're going to read a little bit more. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Oh, did I already read this? I'm just going to continue. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. I love that. It reminds me of when Dr. Bob, or when Bill met Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob said, like, I only want whatever amount minutes, like 15 minutes. He can have this amount of time with me. And it ended up being, a wonderful, like, packed time of, hours of them talking back and forth, because Bill was properly armed with the facts about himself, and he could win over the confidence of Dr. Bob. And this was the first time that Dr. Bob really felt like someone else understood him. Chris?
So a couple of things. One is, when a psychiatrist asks you, how many drinks do you have every night? What is our answer?
Two.
Two. Every one of us is going to say that, right? What is our answer? How many drinks did you drink? What is our answer when we're sharing an AA? We'll exaggerate, because that's really the right place. I got to tell you the story. I sponsored this wonderful guy named Ron, right? And he's sober like a month, and he's working with me. And I gave him the talk about rigorous honesty, right? And he's trying to help. He's trying to help his son out, by doing the family program. His son is in a treatment center, and he's going there. And I've given him the talk, like, just, you gotta be honest, right? So he goes in there, and they're assessing him to see if he's like safe to send the child home to. And they ask him, they go, when you were drinking, we know that you're sober a couple months, but when you were drinking, how much did you drink? Well, I'd drink about 7 or 8 at lunch, and then, on the way home on the train, 7 or 8, and then I'd try to, finish off a quart of hard liquor when I got home. And they're like, oh my God, they're ready to get down. And they go, well, do you do anything else with that? And he's like, yeah, when I get home, I usually smoke 4 or 5 joints. And they're like, oh my God, okay, well, is anything else? And he's like, yeah, I do a lot of LSD. And they go, LSD, how much LSD do you do? Well, I've done over 1,000 trips, and I've documented every single one. And the person is writing this stuff down. They're like, well, do you use depressants? Oh, I always have a bottle of Xanax in my pocket. You never know when you start to get nervous. And it just went on and on and on. And this person, no one had ever been honest to a person like this before, right? And they're like, oh my God. He comes back to me and goes, you asshole. Why did you, they want me in the treatment center now. you know, Oh, it was a great situation.
Oh, that's a great way to end our study for tonight, since it's 9 o'clock. And is there anything else you'd like to say, Chris, about this reading or Bill's story at the end of it?
Thank God for Bill Wilson. I'm gonna say, please become familiar with his essays. Some of the most beautiful writing of Bill Wilson is in the essays in Language of the Heart. And take a look at that book. Summer put it in the chat, right? God, the bestseller. Um, it was the most remarkable recovery book I've read in years, because it convinced me that not only was Bill a spiritual giant, he was a spiritual giant with the spiritual giants. You know, he was a participating member in their small spiritual clubs, and that blew me away to learn that. And you never would have found that out without this all the papers and stuff from this guy Axman and this bookseller going there and spending 6 months because it was such an amazing amount of stuff. So anyway, what a great story that was. So that's all I got.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chris, again for spending your Friday night with us. It was an honor to have you here. And thank you all for coming here on Friday night, and welcome to anyone that's new. We'd love to hear from you. We have a little bit of time to do question and answers if there's any, and also any comments. So I'm gonna stop the recording and then we will open up the room. Thank you, and I'm Summer Alcoholic.